In 2025 and 2026, horror games are shifting gears, not just in how they look, but in how they play, how they scare, and how far they're willing to go. Some are built by the biggest names in the industry. Others come from small studios with something to prove. Here's a breakdown of 15 upcoming horror titles from cinematic survival games to experimental nightmares, scheduled to release over the next 2 years. ILL is a first-person horror game developed by Clout Games, a small studio from Russia that's taking a bold, intense approach to visuals and atmosphere. Built with Unreal Engine 5, the game features real-time body deformation, one of its most striking mechanics that makes every encounter feel raw and brutal. You play as a character trapped inside a ruined biotech facility, now overrun by failed experiments and grotesque mutations. Not much is known about the narrative, but the game leans heavily on atmosphere and psychological tension rather than long cutscenes or dialogue. Visual fidelity is a major focus. Gunshots, limb damage, and environmental details are all rendered with unsettling realism. Shooting an enemy's arm can shatter bone. A headshot tears flesh depending on the angle and force. The physics react dynamically, enhancing the intensity of combat. Gameplay revolves around survival. Ammunition is scarce, crafting is essential, and not every enemy can or should be fought head-on. Several gameplay clips show physical interactions like manually opening doors or dragging objects, suggesting that even basic actions come with risk and consequence. Sound design and lighting push the tension further. Flickering lights, distant footsteps, and narrow corridors create a constant sense of unease. There's little reliance on cheap jump scares. The discomfort comes from how real and close everything feels. ILL draws clear inspiration from classic body horror films, like The Thing, as well as gameplay influences from Resident Evil and Half-Life 2. But it isn't just copying. It's pushing horror forward by fusing technical detail with deeply unsettling imagery. There's no confirmed release date yet, but since its showcase at major gaming events, ILL has become one of the most talked about indie horror titles. Its commitment to immersive fear and physical tension sets it apart in a genre that rarely goes this far. Number 2. Resident Evil Requiem. Resident Evil Requiem is Capcom's next mainline entry in the long-running survival horror series, set for release on February 27, 2026. The game brings back the atmospheric tension and resource management the franchise is known for, while also pushing the series into a more cinematic, next-gen direction. The story centers around Grace Ashcroft, a new protagonist and FBI agent investigating the death of her mother. Her search leads her deep into the ruins of a reimagined Raccoon City, a place still haunted by past experiments and buried corporate secrets. Unlike previous entries, Requiem blends both first-person and third-person perspectives, allowing players to switch between them depending on playstyle. What stands out is the visual fidelity. Built on Capcom's RE engine, the environments are dense with detail. Abandoned metro stations, flooded labs, and decaying skyscrapers filled with mutated life. Lighting and sound design are tuned to heighten dread rather than deliver cheap shocks, bringing the player back to the slow burn horror that defined early Resident Evil games. Gameplay focuses on tight survival mechanics. Players will need to manage limited resources, craft items on the go, and make difficult choices in combat. Enemies aren't just bullet sponges, they're fast, unpredictable, and often mutated in ways that affect how they move and react. Some are immune to light, others adapt to your behavior. New mechanics include an upgraded partner AI system and investigative segments, where Grace must uncover clues, solve environmental puzzles, and piece together the conspiracy surrounding her past. The infection system also returns, but now with more visible effects on the player character, both physically and psychologically. Resident Evil Requiem isn't trying to reinvent the series, it's refining it. With a darker tone, layered storytelling, and visual polish made for current-gen hardware, this entry seems focused on delivering a more grounded, narrative-driven horror experience. Capcom is positioning Requiem not just as a continuation of the franchise, but as a reset point, both for the world and the player. Whether you're a longtime fan or new to the series, this looks like a pivotal chapter that blends legacy elements with bold, modern design. Number 3. Silent Hill F. Silent Hill F is Konami's boldest move in revitalizing the Silent Hill franchise, shifting the psychological horror formula to a new cultural setting. Developed by Neobards Entertainment, This entry takes place in 1960s Japan, a stark contrast from the fog-covered American towns fans are used to. The story revolves around a young girl living in a rural village plagued by mysterious plant-based infections. As reality begins to unravel, the narrative explores themes of isolation, identity, and trauma, core pillars of the series, through a distinct Japanese lens. While plot details are still under wraps, early footage suggests a slow descent into body horror, where natural beauty turns violent and invasive. Visually, Silent Hill F is stunning in a disturbing way. Cherry blossoms rot in real time, delicate vines twist through abandoned homes, and the infection itself spreads across both environments and bodies with a haunting elegance. The contrast between serene nature and grotesque transformation is what defines the game's mood. Unlike previous titles developed in-house or by Western studios, F brings in acclaimed Japanese horror writer Ryukishi07, known for his work on Higurashi. His influence is expected to shape a more narrative-heavy and emotionally charged experience, with psychological horror taking precedence over action. Gameplay specifics remain minimal, but based on Konami's statements and visual cues, players can expect slower, exploration-driven pacing, light puzzle elements, and encounters that rely more on evasion than combat. The atmosphere looks oppressive, emphasizing dread over shock and silence over noise. Silent Hill F is not a reboot, it's a spiritual shift. Instead of revisiting the same town and same traumas, it dives into cultural memory and horror as seen through Japanese folklore and emotion. It's experimental, maybe even divisive, but it's also exactly the kind of risk Silent Hill has needed. For fans of atmospheric, psychological horror, F could mark a true evolution, one that brings the series back to its disturbing roots while exploring them in an entirely new direction. Number 4. Directive 8020. Directive 8020 is the next installment in the Dark Pictures anthology by Supermassive Games, and it marks a significant departure from the series' usual format. Instead of haunted houses or war-torn villages, this chapter moves the horror deep into space, specifically a remote planet known as Tau Ceti. Set in the far future, the story follows a group of colonists on a terraforming mission gone wrong. Something is hiding beneath the surface of Tau Ceti, and it's not human. The narrative revolves around a growing paranoia among the crew as they begin to suspect that one of them may no longer be themselves. True to Supermassive's style, Directive 8020 is an interactive cinematic horror experience. Players control multiple characters, make branching decisions, and face life-or-death situations where a single mistake can get someone killed. This time, though, the threats are less about ghosts or demons and more about identity, trust, and something alien that can imitate you. The game introduces a new mechanic called turning points, which alters a character's behavior or motivations permanently based on how they process trauma or react to others. It adds depth to the already tense decision-making, making every choice not just about survival, but psychological change. Visually, the game leans into cold sci-fi minimalism, sterile corridors, flickering consoles, and quiet halls that feel more claustrophobic than any cave or crypt. The design echoes films like Alien and The Thing, and it's clear that atmosphere takes priority over action. Directive 8020 is also notable for its updated engine, with smoother facial animations and improved lighting that enhances emotional delivery during conversations and critical scenes. Dialogue is sharper and character writing seems more grounded than in previous entries. While it's still part of the anthology, Directive 8020 feels more ambitious and standalone, closer in tone to Until Dawn or The Quarry, but with a stronger sci-fi edge. It's scheduled to launch on October 2nd, 2025, and may very well be the most narratively complex entry in the series so far. Number 5, Dying Light: The Beast is Techland's next chapter in its post-apocalyptic zombie series, bringing back the high-stakes parkour and brutal melee combat that defined the franchise, only now with a darker tone and deeper narrative focus. Set years after the events of Dying Light 2, the game follows the return of Kyle Crane, a fan-favorite character presumed dead. The world has changed since his disappearance. Cities have crumbled further, and humanity clings to survival in fortified zones, while the infected continue to evolve into more terrifying forms. Gameplay remains centered on fast, fluid traversal. Players can scale buildings, vault over obstacles, and navigate rooftops with a reworked parkour system that's smoother and more responsive than ever. Movement now feels heavier and more physical, adding tension when running for your life. Combat has also been expanded. In addition to traditional melee weapons, the game introduces new gear like UV flamethrowers, improvised explosives, and customizable crossbows. Enemies don't just die, they react to where and how you hit them, adding layers to every fight. What sets the beast apart from earlier titles is its shift in tone. The story leans into psychological horror, exploring themes of guilt, sacrifice, and identity. Kyle is no longer just a survivor, he's a man haunted by what he's become. Infected, but still human. For now, the open world returns, but it's more fractured and dangerous. Techland is designing zones that feel distinct, not just visually but mechanically. Some areas are overrun by mutated variants, others are ruled by desperate human factions. Dynamic weather and day-night cycles also make a comeback, once again making nighttime exploration a true gamble. Dying Light the Beast is built in a heavily upgraded version of Techland's Sea Engine, promising denser environments, better lighting, and improved AI behavior. Enemy mobs now coordinate more intelligently, and ambient threats like collapsing structures or spreading fires force players to stay alert. Launching August 22, 2025, this sequel looks to blend everything fans loved about the original with more mature storytelling, greater player freedom, and a constant sense of danger, whether from the infected or from yourself. Number 6. Little Nightmares 3. Little Nightmares 3 marks the return of one of the most stylistically unique horror franchises in modern gaming. This time, the development has shifted from Tarsier Studios to Supermassive Games, known for their cinematic horror titles, but the eerie charm and unsettling tone of the series remain intact. Set in a new, twisted region called the Spiral, the game introduces two entirely new protagonists, Lo and Alone. These children must navigate a surreal and dangerous world, working together to escape grotesque threats that tower over them, both literally and emotionally. For the first time in the series, online co-op is available. Each player controls one character as they explore fragmented landscapes stitched together by nightmares. Those who prefer solo play can still experience the game with AI controlling the second character. The world of Little Nightmares 3 continues to thrive on silent storytelling. There's no dialogue, just movement, expression, and the slow discovery of a world gone wrong. Whether it's a floating house suspended in fog or a forest made entirely of broken toys, every location tells a piece of the larger puzzle. Gameplay sticks to the franchise's formula: side-scrolling platforming, light puzzles, stealth, and moments of intense chase. What's new is a stronger emphasis on environmental storytelling and character synergy. Lo carries a bow, Alone wields a wrench, and both tools serve both mechanical and narrative purposes. Visually, the game continues its tradition of muted colors, exaggerated proportions, and haunting lighting. The art direction leans into themes of childhood fears and distorted innocence, creating a world where safety is always just out of reach. Set to release on October 10, 2025, Little Nightmares 3 will be available on all major platforms, including PS5, Xbox Series, PC, and even Nintendo Switch. Despite the change in developers, early previews suggest that the game retains its core identity: a quiet, deeply disturbing journey through a nightmare that feels oddly familiar. Number 7. Killing Floor 3. Killing Floor 3 is Tripwire Interactive's return to the chaotic co-op shooter formula they helped define, only this time it's bigger, meaner, and far more disturbing. Set in the year 2091, the game takes place in a world controlled by the biotech megacorp Horzine, where horrific experiments have spiraled out of control. You play as a member of Nightfall, a rogue paramilitary group fighting back against waves of engineered monstrosities known as Zeds. These aren't your average zombies, they're fast, mutated, and creatively grotesque, each one designed to challenge both your reflexes and your stomach. Killing Floor 3 is a first-person co-op shooter at its core. Teams of up to 6 players must survive increasingly difficult waves of enemies, using a deep arsenal of weapons, gadgets, and class-based abilities. Every class, from medics to berserkers, has its own upgrade path, and cooperation isn't optional, it's survival. What separates this installment from its predecessors is its tone. While earlier games leaned into gory fun, this entry feels darker, colder, and more oppressive. The new art style leans heavily into body horror, with Zeds that look like failed surgical experiments or corrupted cybernetic hybrids. Blood doesn't just splatter, it clings, pools, and stains the environment. Combat is faster and more tactical. Enemies now have improved AI behaviors like flanking, retreating, or using verticality to ambush players. Boss encounters are no longer just bullet sponges. They adapt to your tactics, forcing teams to coordinate on the fly. Powered by Unreal Engine 5, the game's visuals have taken a sharp leap forward. Levels are drenched in atmosphere. Abandoned labs, freezing industrial zones, and urban war zones lit by flickering neon and fire. The environments also react dynamically to combat, with destructible elements and changing lighting conditions as waves progress. Killing Floor 3 launches on July 24, 2025 for PS5, Xbox Series XS, and PC. It may not reinvent the genre, but it polishes it to a bloody sheen, blending co-op chaos with body horror intensity in a package that feels both brutal and precise. Number 8. The Occultist. The Occultist is a first-person supernatural horror game developed by Pentakill Studios, built around paranormal investigation, possession, and psychological unraveling. It's set on Godstone Island, a mysterious, fog-drenched location filled with decaying architecture and restless spirits. You play as Alan Scott, a detective with the ability to connect with the dead through occult rituals. Sent to the island in search of his missing father, Alan quickly finds himself drawn into a larger mystery involving cults, haunted artifacts, and the blurred line between spiritual visions and reality. The Occultist is structured more like a narrative-driven mystery than a traditional horror shooter. There's no combat in the conventional sense. Instead, gameplay revolves around exploration, puzzle solving, and ritual-based mechanics. Using tools like a spirit lens, arcane symbols, and ceremonial objects, players must interact with the environment in ways that change both the physical and spiritual worlds. A unique feature is the seance system, where players must communicate with ghosts and interpret fragmented memories to uncover new paths or warnings. These moments are heavily atmospheric, whispers in the dark, ghostly shadows moving at the edge of vision, and sudden shifts in reality all contribute to the unease. Visually, the game leans into cinematic lighting and photorealistic textures. The environments are richly detailed: candlelit halls, flooded crypts, forgotten chambers lined with occult markings. Every room feels lived in and cursed. Audio is another highlight. The developers are using binaural sound and reactive ambient noise to intensify the tension. You might hear creaking floors from the level above, or the slow inhale of something watching you from behind. Currently planned for Q1 2026, The Occultist will release on PS5, Xbox Series X, S, and PC. It's not an action-heavy horror game, but if you're drawn to quiet dread, layered mystery, and slow, immersive tension, this one may be worth keeping on your radar. Number 9. Chronos: The New Dawn. Chronos: The New Dawn is a sci-fi survival horror game developed by Bloober Team, the studio behind The Medium and Layers of Fear. Known for their psychological approach to fear, this time Bloober is going full physical, introducing mutated enemies, environmental hazards, and body horror in a dystopian off-world colony. Set in a crumbling megastructure on a distant planet, Chronos places you in the role of a lone technician tasked with restoring power to a facility long abandoned. At least, that's how it starts. It quickly becomes clear that the colony is not empty. Something has survived, and it's changing. Gameplay blends traditional third-person exploration with resource-driven survival mechanics. There's crafting, stealth, and limited combat, but everything is designed to make you feel underprepared. Most encounters are better avoided than engaged. Enemies mutate based on how you interact with them. Some grow stronger if you run, others adapt if you fight too often. The facility itself is semi-open, allowing non-linear exploration across different sectors. Each area is distinct: abandoned greenhouses, research labs overrun with growth, flooded control rooms, all tied together by a core mystery involving failed AI experiments and something called the Bloom. Visual design is dense and oppressive. The world feels heavy and decaying, with lighting that emphasizes both beauty and rot. Organic growths seep through metal walls, machines pulse like they're alive, and the line between synthetic and biological starts to blur. One of the most striking features is the mutation system, where your character's body begins to change based on environmental exposure. These mutations offer both buffs and drawbacks, creating a dynamic risk-reward system that affects movement, perception, and even the ending you receive. Expected to launch in late 2025, Chronos: The New Dawn aims to deliver a survival horror experience where fear isn't just about what you see, but what you're slowly becoming. Number 10. The Sinking City 2. The Sinking City 2 is a direct sequel to Frogwares' Lovecraftian detective horror game, taking everything from the first installment and pushing it into darker, more disturbing territory. Built entirely from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5, this sequel promises deeper storytelling, more reactive environments, and horror that doesn't just lurk, it floods. Set in a new coastal city also plagued by supernatural decay, the game once again puts players in the role of a lone investigator. This time, however, the threats are more immediate. While the original leaned into open-ended casework and psychological dread, The Sinking City 2 adds survival mechanics, scarcity of resources, and more visceral encounters. The city itself is alive, or rather dying in slow motion. Streets sink beneath rising waters, buildings crumble into the sea, strange vegetation and barnacle-covered symbols creep across every surface. Exploration is now tighter and more dangerous, with each district hiding its own ecosystem of madness, cult activity, and otherworldly interference. Investigation remains at the core of the gameplay. Players will still follow clues, piece together fragmented memories, and make deductions through a revamped mind palace system. But choices now carry greater weight, changing who lives, who turns on you, and what form the city's descent takes. Combat has been expanded. You now face creatures that defy logic, twisting masses of flesh, waterborne abominations, and things that move like they're being pulled by invisible strings. Ammunition is limited, and mismanaging it could turn a manageable encounter into a fatal mistake. The sequel also leans further into psychological instability. Sanity is no longer just a meter, it affects perception, sound, and even your journal entries. The more you uncover, the less certain you are of what's real. The narrative embraces this, blurring the lines between investigation and hallucination. The Sinking City 2 is expected to launch in late 2025, bringing with it a more focused experience, less open-world sprawl, more narrative density, and a heavier dose of cosmic horror. For fans of slow-burn dread mixed with mystery and survival tension, this could be Frogwares' most ambitious title yet. Number 11. Ritual Tides. Ritual Tides is a narrative-driven survival horror game set on a remote island where ancient rituals, folklore, and something far older than humanity begin to resurface. Developed by Vertpaint Studios, the game blends psychological tension, occult mystery, and environmental storytelling in a way that feels both grounded and surreal. You play as a stranded outsider, a researcher or traveler, depending on how you build your backstory, who arrives on the island after a storm cuts off all communication. The locals are quiet, the atmosphere is wrong, and something is clearly happening beneath the surface, both literally and spiritually. What makes Ritual Tides unique is its emphasis on cultural horror. Rather than relying on monsters or gore, the game leans into ritual-based fear. Whispered chants, eerie processions, locked shrines, and ancient texts that hint at cycles of sacrifice and rebirth. The island itself changes over time, reflecting your progress and your choices. Gameplay focuses on exploration, stealth, and limited confrontation. Weapons are rare and fighting is discouraged. Most of the tension comes from managing your visibility, noise, and spiritual presence. Certain areas require ceremonial actions to enter safely, forcing players to engage with the island's belief systems to survive. The world is semi-open, encouraging non-linear discovery. You might stumble upon a ritual in progress or a ruin that reconfigures itself when the tide rises. Time and weather affect both the environment and the story, with key events only accessible under specific conditions, adding replayability and unpredictability. Visually, the game uses a muted, grainy palette, evoking old coastal photographs and ancient woodcuts. Fog, firelight, and moonlit water dominate the landscape, creating an atmosphere of isolation that never really lifts. There are no safe zones, only temporary shelter. Slated for release sometime in 2025, Ritual Tides is shaping up to be a horror game that's more about dread than jump scares. It's for players who enjoy unraveling mysteries slowly, decoding lore through the environment, and never quite knowing whether the horror is external or already inside them. Number 12, Ad Infinitum. Ad Infinitum is a psychological horror game set during the aftermath of World War I, where trauma, guilt, and nightmare become indistinguishable from reality. Originally released in 2024, the game is receiving a significant next-gen update in 2025, bringing enhanced visuals, refined mechanics, and deeper environmental immersion to PS5 and Xbox Series XS. You play as a German soldier suffering from post-traumatic stress, trapped between two realities: the crumbling walls of his childhood home and the trenches of a war that still haunts him. The game doesn't follow a traditional linear path. Instead, it unfolds like memory, fragmented, looping, and unreliable. The horror here is psychological, layered with symbolism and personal history. Monsters aren't just creatures, they're manifestations of loss, shame, and inner conflict. One enemy might represent a commanding officer's abuse, while another is a twisted echo of a fallen brother. Every encounter has emotional weight. Gameplay blends exploration, puzzle solving, and stealth. There's no combat. Progress requires observation and interpretation, reading documents, decoding memories, and navigating shifting layouts that reflect the protagonist's unstable mind. The next-gen version adds smoother transitions between environments, improved lighting, and more complex environmental effects like dynamic fog and ambient war sounds. Visually, the game is deeply atmospheric. The family mansion is frozen in time, with peeling wallpaper and empty cradles. The trenches, meanwhile, are soaked in mud and despair, lined with barbed wire and crawling with unnatural shapes that flicker at the edge of vision. The next-gen enhancements also bring haptic feedback and 3D audio, using PS5 and Xbox tech to make small sounds, creaking wood, muffled cries, a footstep too close, feel disturbingly real. There's also an expanded collectibles system, encouraging deeper dives into lore for players who want to piece together the full backstory. More than a traditional horror game, Ad Infinitum is a study in grief. It doesn't offer comfort, it offers confrontation, with memory, with guilt, and with a war that left no part of its victims untouched. The updated version is expected to release in mid to late 2025, and for players seeking a slow, methodical, and personal kind of horror, it remains one of the genre's most underrated experiences. Number 13, Slitterhead. Slitterhead is the long-awaited return of Keiichiro Toyama, the original creator of Silent Hill, Siren, and Gravity Rush. But instead of psychological horror, Slitterhead dives headfirst into body horror action. Fast, violent, and full of bizarre transformations. Developed by Boca Game Studio, the game is set in a futuristic East Asian city, blending neon-soaked streets with urban decay and a strange biological presence infecting the world beneath. You play as a shape-shifting entity, part human, part weapon, tasked with hunting down other creatures hiding in plain sight among the population. Unlike traditional horror games, Slitterhead is an action-forward experience. Combat is fast and brutal, featuring a wide variety of melee and supernatural abilities. Your body becomes the weapon, morphing arms into blades, bursting tendrils from your spine, or unleashing explosive, grotesque attacks mid-combo. Every fight is kinetic and unpredictable. The game plays with the idea of identity. Enemies often begin as normal people, until they suddenly unravel into monstrous forms. The player, too, can switch hosts, inhabiting different bodies to access new skills or perspectives. It's a mechanic that creates tension both in combat and in how the world reacts to you. Musically, the game features an original soundtrack by Akira Yamaoka, reuniting him with Toyama for the first time since Silent Hill. The audio leans into distorted industrial tones, pulsating beneath the chaos and amplifying the surreal violence. Visually, Slitterhead mixes urban realism with extreme body horror. Transformations are animated in full detail, skin splitting, bones reshaping, organs twisting into weapons. But despite its graphic style, there's a strange elegance to how the game presents its world, like a fever dream wrapped in neon. There's still some mystery around the story, but early footage suggests themes of corruption, control, and biological evolution. It's not subtle, but it's not trying to be. Scheduled for release sometime in 2025, Slitterhead is shaping up to be a wild fusion of action, horror, and Japanese weirdness. Number 14. Fear the Spotlight is a retro-inspired survival horror game developed by Cozy Game Pals. And while it looks like a love letter to PS1-era graphics, its atmosphere and storytelling are surprisingly sharp. The full version is expected in late 2025, building on the success of its demo, which quietly gained a cult following. Set in a haunted high school, sometime in the late 90s, the game follows Vivian and Amy, two students sneaking into the school after hours, only to uncover the buried truth behind a tragic fire, forgotten victims, and a presence that still lingers in the halls. Gameplay is kept simple and focused. It's third-person and slow-paced, with light stealth and puzzle solving. There's no combat. Your tools are a flashlight, basic inventory items, and your ability to stay calm when things start to shift. And they do shift. Lighting changes, environments morph subtly, and figures appear just outside the cone of your vision. The horror here is subtle and intimate. Instead of jump scares or gore, Fear the Spotlight leans on dread. Flickering lights, static humming from an old intercom, a shadow where no shadow should be. It's deeply nostalgic but never gimmicky. Visually, the game uses lo-fi textures and chunky models on purpose, but lighting, animation, and timing are carefully crafted. This isn't just a throwback, it's a deliberate use of style to create unease. Every scene feels like an old VHS tape you're not sure you were supposed to watch. The story explores themes of grief, guilt, and memory, and does so through dialogue and exploration rather than cutscenes. Notes, yearbook photos, and burned-out classrooms slowly piece together a past that someone clearly wants to keep buried. Fear the Spotlight will be available on PS5, Xbox Series, PC, and Switch.